never thought my quiet lakefront home would turn into a crime scene. One minute, I was sitting on my porch sipping coffee. The next, I was staring down the barrels of flashlights and threats. The HOA didn't just want my property, they wanted me gone. It started on a humid Thursday night in late July, the kind of night where the air sticks to your skin and the frogs down by the water never stop croaking. I was closing up my toolbox after fixing the deck light when I saw two black SUVs pull into my gravel driveway. Their headlights cut through the mist, rolling off Lake Marston like search beams. At first, I thought it was just some lost tourists. People came out here all the time, thinking the lake road led to a public campground. But when the doors opened and I saw HOA President Mark Cullen step out, flanked by two men in tactical jackets, my stomach dropped. Mark was the kind of man who thought his clipboard gave him divine authority. I'd seen him fine old women for hanging wind chimes, and last week he put a violation notice on my mailbox for being rusted. Rusted! The man had no soul. He didn't come alone tonight. "Evening, Rick," he called out with that smug, lazy smirk. "We need to talk about your property boundaries." I stayed still on the porch, my hand resting on the wooden railing. "It's nearly 10 p.m., Mark. HOA business isn't conducted after dark, unless you're running a cult." The guy beside him, a big, bald enforcer type, took a step forward. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Something about his tone froze me. This wasn't a warning, it was a threat. My mind raced. I've been fighting the HOA for months over a drainage issue that wasn't even my fault. They claimed my property's retaining wall redirected runoff into neighboring yards. I'd already spent thousands proving the soil reports wrong, but Mark wanted the land, and now it looked like he was done playing fair. "Step off my property," I said, my voice steady but tight. "You've got no right to be here." Mark laughed, that short, condescending laugh I'd heard at every HOA meeting. "Rick, this isn't your property anymore. You'll understand soon enough." That's when I saw it, a manila folder in his hand, and something inside it glinting under the porch light. Papers, a deed transfer maybe. I didn't know yet, but I was about to find out the hard way. The bald man grabbed my arm before I could react. Another shoved me from behind. The world tilted as I stumbled down the steps, gravel biting into my palms. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. Mark leaned close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive, sharp, and entirely out of place in the woods. "We're going for a drive. You're signing over your lot tonight. The board has already voted. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Panic clawed up my throat. "You're out of your mind, Mark. This is kidnapping." But the engine started before I could say another word. They pushed me into the back seat of one SUV, tinted windows, no license plates visible. My hands trembled as the vehicle rolled down the dirt road, away from the lake, deeper into the forest. I looked out through the fog glass and saw my cabin, the place I'd built with my own hands, fading into darkness. Inside the car, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint rattle of my breath. The bald man in front spoke for the first time. "You should have just paid the assessment fee, Rick. Nobody crosses the HOA." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about boundaries or water runoff. It was about control, and they were willing to do anything to keep it. After about 15 minutes, the SUV turned onto a narrow dirt path I didn't recognize. Trees arched overhead, blotting out the moonlight. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the sound of the gravel under the tires. We stopped in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. The air smelled like rain and fear. Mark opened my door, his face illuminated by a flashlight beam. "Get out. We'll make this quick." I stumbled out, my knees weak. The men stood in a semicircle, their breath misting in the cool air. Mark handed me a clipboard. On it, a quitclaim deed, already filled out with my name. "You signed, and this all ends peacefully." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You think you can steal a man's home with a signature in the woods?" Mark's smile didn't waver. "We already have your neighbors." He didn't resist. A chill ripped through me. My neighbor, Jeff, had vanished last month. His place was empty, lights off, mailbox overflowing. Everyone said he moved suddenly for work, but now I wasn't so sure. Something in me snapped. I wasn't going to be another missing homeowner on Mark's checklist. As Mark pressed the pen into my hand, I took a slow breath and slammed the clipboard against his chest. Go to hell! The bald man lunged forward, but I ducked, rolling in the dirt. My hand found a fallen branch, thick, heavy. I swung blindly, connecting with someone's leg. A curse rang out. Grab him, Mark shouted. I bolted. Branches whipped my face as I ran through the trees, every step echoing like thunder in the still night. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the flashlights, away from the people who thought they could own me. Behind me, I heard them shouting, chasing, but adrenaline drowned everything else. The woods opened into a shallow ravine. I slid down the embankment, my heart hammering like a drum. I crouched low behind a fallen log, chest heaving. For minutes, or maybe hours, I waited, listening to their footsteps fade. Only then did I realize my phone was gone. My wallet, too. They'd taken everything. But they hadn't taken my will to fight. That night, as the moonlight cut through the trees, I made myself a promise. If the HOA wanted war, I'd give them one they'd never forget. The woods smelled like wet pine and old secrets the next morning. I sat on a mossy log, shirt still damp with sweat, and tried to make sense of the previous night. Adrenaline had kept me moving until dawn peeled back the shadows, and only then did exhaustion pry my knees loose. I must have looked like I'd been through a war. Dirt in my hair, a gash on my elbow where a bramble had found purchase, and the ragged breasts that made me sound older than I was. I'd barely been gone an hour when my neighbor, Lisa, found me. She was a nurse and oddly fearless, the kind of person who brings casseroles after funerals and speaks her mind in PTA meetings. She hunted me down because, despite the HOA's whisper campaign, she still trusted me. "Wreck," she hissed as she scrambled down the slope toward me, her face pale from worry. "We thought you were taken. I thought I vanished like Jeff," I said, eyes cold. "You thought the HOA made me disappear too?" Lisa grabbed my arm. "I went to the sheriff. They said they'd look into missing persons, but we both know small-town cops take complaints in order of blood. You need a plan." I had a plan, but it needed resources. Last night, they'd taken my phone and wallet. They'd also left me with 2 clear messages. 1, they could get into my house at night. 2, they weren't afraid to use force. But they had one weakness: arrogance. The HOA thought their power came from fear, from unanimous nods in their community room, from city council connections. Arrogance makes people sloppy. "Any idea where Mark and his crew keep evidence? Like their records, invoices, anything showing payments to contractors or weird drain work?" I asked. Lisa tipped her head. "Their office, behind the clubhouse. The door's old, but they keep a locked filing cabinet in the back. I watched the guy bring in boxes last week. He looked nervous." My pulse quickened. "We get access to that cabinet, we might find the quitclaim copies, the backdated notices, or something that ties them to Jeff's disappearance." She hesitated. "Rick, if you go in there and they catch you." "They can't arrest me for defending my home," I said, "but yeah, this is dangerous." She nodded. "I'll help. I'll call a friend who knows a locksmith. We'll be careful." From the ravine, I told myself the first rule: don't run blind. Last night I'd escaped because luck and panic had been on my side. Now I needed cunning. I needed witnesses who weren't family or friends so their testimony would carry weight. I needed to capture things on camera and to get an impartial person on my side. Someone who wouldn't be cowed by Mark's resume or his board's checks. I needed the sheriff to care. We moved that morning like ghosts. Lisa fetched her spare key to the community center. She volunteered there occasionally and claimed she'd left it in her sock drawer. We parked out of sight and crept along the clubhouse hedges under mid-morning sun. From the outside, the HOA office looked harmless. Potted ferns, a welcome mat, picture-perfect notices about lawn maintenance. But the back smelled faintly of mildew and bureaucratic secrets. Inside, the filing cabinet groaned like a bear getting up. The third drawer yielded a stack of envelopes with plastic windows and letterhead. SHOA. My heart thumped as I riffled through invoices, contractor receipts, and bank transfer forms. There it was. A payment to Seabreeze Contracting for a dam project, signed off on a date before a permit had been issued. There were notes. Urgent. Bypass zoning to meet sales schedule. And there were also signatures. Mark Cullen, treasurer, Janet Price, and my stomach dropped, an initial next to a scribbled phone number that matched the card I'd seen with the man who shoved me last night. "Take photos," she said softly, pulling her phone out. "Everything." We worked quickly. My hands shook as I fanned through pages, each one staining my fingers with ink and evidence. We found expense reports showing large cash withdrawals. There were emails printed and highlighted, make it look like a county-approved repair. Another, "Quiet the neighbors. Jeff's coalitions are spreading like weeds." I felt that old bitter feeling. Betrayal. Neighbors we'd buried at barbecues and birthday parties were conspiring to steal land, falsify permits, and possibly abduct men who opposed them. How do you trust a town when the town organizes to crush you? When we left, Lisa shoved the thick folder into my backpack. "You need a lawyer," she said. "I know, and I've already got someone in mind." I thought of Rachel, the environmental lawyer in the county seat, who'd once fought toothlessly against a developer. She'd won small fights, but those were enough to terrify tiny municipalities. I trusted her to understand permits and reservoirs. Lisa hugged me hard before we left. "Be careful," she whispered. "And Rick, don't get yourself killed." Rachel's office smelled like coffee and legal briefs. When I burst in an hour later, she looked up from a stack of papers as if she'd been expecting trouble. "You're breathing like a man who's been running from something," she said with a half grin. "Because I was," I replied. I handed her the folder from the HOA office. She flipped through it with the kind of clinical calm that comes from reading other people's disasters for a living. Her mouth tightened. "This is good," she finally said. "This is very, very good. It shows motive, it shows coordination, and it shows that the HOA acted without permits. It also shows someone told Jeff to be quiet." "That's the thing," I said. "I don't know what happened to Jeff." Rachel leaned back, eyes narrowed. "You'll need to prove he didn't walk away voluntarily. We get an officer to say he's missing, we get records of his last payment, mail, utility usage, then we connect the dots to Mark. We also bring this file to the county zoning office. If they approved nothing, which I suspect, they'll be in for a world of hurt." She reached for a pen. "We file for a temporary restraining order to stop any transfers and freeze HOA accounts. We subpoenaed her bank records. If they've been paying off contractors in cash, that shows intent to avoid audits." I felt a flicker of optimism for the first time since the board threw me into the woods. "But you realize," Rachel continued, "this will turn ugly. When you stare at sharks, they stare back." "Let them," I said. "We'll make them regret it." We went public the next week. Marty, that YouTuber from the county who runs the Watchdog channel, came by and filmed me outside my cabin, the HOA's clubhouse and docks in the background. He has a way with the camera that makes ordinary men look like protagonists. His crew set up an interview and I told my story, the nighttime encounter, the forced ride, the quit claim on the clipboard. I went into the office with Lisa. I got copies of their invoices and their emails. They forged permits to build the dam, and now they want to make me the fall guy. They took Jeff. I don't know where he is, but I'm going to find out. 2 days later, the video had 100,000 views. The local paper picked it up. People started coming forward. Old man I had seen at fishing spots slipped me envelopes in the general store. One woman, her eyes red, handed me a receipt showing a donation she'd made to the HOA that went missing from the ledger. The sheriff, finally feeling pressure, called me into the station. Sheriff Harlan was a gruff man with more patience than level-headedness, a small-town cop who'd seen plenty of family feuds, but little institutional fraud. He'd been suspicious of the HOA for a while, but had never had the proof. "Doc," he said, offering me a chair, "we can't arrest people on looks in a YouTube video." "Then do your job," I said bluntly. "Check their bank records, subpoena the contractor, ask the county for the permit timeline. Jeff's missing, Sheriff. That's a serious thing." Harlan nodded slowly. "We'll get a warrant. I can push for a search, but if they hid records off-site or used cash, it's a needle in a haystack. And let's start with the haystack. They keep everything in one place, their clubhouse backroom." He agreed to move. Within 48 hours, a county judge signed the warrant. On the morning of the raid, the sunshine felt like a compass light, too bright for what we were about to do. Officers arrived in unmarked cars and fanned out. A forensic team with gloves and evidence bags followed. For a brief, terrible moment, Hearing the authorities at the HOA clubhouse felt like confirmation that the town believed me. We found ledgers tucked in secret compartments, cash stashes, and a ledger that didn't make sense until we matched it to invoices, payments to shell companies for landscape improvement that correlated to contractor transfers. There were emails flagged urgent, Jeff, and a voicemail in which Mark's voice was sharp. Make him disappear from the listings. But the prize was different. A thin folder shoved under the filing cabinet labeled quit claims. Inside were photocopies of signatures for several properties, including Jeff's address. Many were dated after a single evening conversation and lacked witness signatures. In one folder was a slip of paper with my name and the words, "Next, Lawson." Sheriff Harlan's face darkened. "This is worse than I thought," he muttered. "We've got coordinated forgery and coercion." They also found additional evidence of the early unpermitted dam work, invoices submitted as maintenance, even as the contractor was building a new embankment. The county inspector's stamp had been doctored in at least 2 documents. Someone inside County Hall had been careless or on the take. Just as the team bagged the last folder, a call came in. A local tow operator had found an old pickup truck near an isolated logging road, its engine cold and license plate scrubbed. Inside, tucked under the seat, Jeff's driver's license. My chest hollowed. I felt the air leave my lungs like someone had taken my breath with a pliers. "Bring it in," Harlan ordered quietly. We found Jeff in a motel 2 hours away. Alive, but shaken. Drinks and slurred words explaining a story that read like a bad film. He'd been coerced into signing, threatened with financial ruin, then paid to disappear temporarily while the HOA fixed its legal paper trail. He'd been given money and told to stay away for his own good. "They told me I'd lose everything if I didn't sign," he told the detective. "They said they'd make it look like I abandoned the property. I panicked. I left. I didn't mean, I'm sorry, Rick." Jeff's hands trembled. "I thought if I stayed quiet, they'd be done, but then they started pressuring my family. It's okay," I said, though my voice sounded thin. "It's over. You're back now." This isn't to say I forgave him easily. He'd let me and others sit under the threat of doubt. He'd been complicit, if terrified, but he was a man wrung out by fear. The town is small enough that secrets like terror spread faster than gossip. As the evidence emerged, so did the crack in the HOA's armor. The county issued emergency notices halting any dam or drainage work. Several board members resigned under pressure. Mark Cullen went silent, an artful, dangerous silence. The community meetings I had once been shouted down at now rang with fury. Neighbors who pressured their wives to be quiet were stepping up, shaking when they spoke, but speaking nonetheless. Leads were turning into testimony. Rachel filed suit, not only to stop any transfers, but to rescind any deed signed under duress. We presented the forged permits and the ledgers showing cash footwork as proof of malfeasance. The subpoenaed bank records corroborated our suspicions. The contractor, cornered by evidence and fearing jail, flipped. He testified that Victoria and Mark had insisted on doing it quickly and not to mention the county. That courtroom that day was packed. I watched as Mark squirmed in his chair while invoices and emails were read aloud. People watched him like a man watching a snake uncoil. He'd been the puppet master for years, but when the strings were cut, he looked suddenly small, vulnerable even. "It's incredible," Rachel told me as we left the courthouse. "You found the right people. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." I wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Victories in courts don't erase the theft of nights and faith, but they do set things painfully right. That evening back at my cabin, I sat on the same porch that had seen me shoved toward the SUVs. The lake glinted under a slow-moving moon. Lisa sat down beside me and handed me a beer. "You did good," she said. "You scared him back." We only scared the ones that weren't already scared, the ones who keep their heads down because they're afraid." She nudged my shoulder. "They'll need time. The town will heal. People will forgive when they remember who they are." "We'll see," I said. The phone buzzed, the text from Sheriff Harlan. "Hold tight, we'll move on charges next week. Be careful." I exhaled, feeling the weight lift fractionally. The world had shifted. The HOA's enforcers had overstepped in not just arrogance, but criminality. They'd dragged me for a signature in the woods,
and now the law had found their trail. I went inside, pulled out a clean shirt, and sat at my kitchen table where the map of my property had once been pinned. I spread the printed copies of the damn invoices, the emails, Jeff's testimony, and the photos that Lisa had taken in the clubhouse. I thought about the men who'd taken me, about how close it had come to a far worse end. If they'd been angrier, if they'd brought more men, if they'd known where my children kept their winter coats. Simple hypotheticals, but they sat heavy. The rage was still there, but it had a purpose now. It wasn't raw reaction, it was fuel. There was one more thing I wanted to do. The HOA had used fear and theater, SUVs in the night, men in tactical jackets, and empty threats to silence dissent. They'd also relied on the quiet complicity of people who preferred comfort to curiosity. I wanted to strip all of that away. So I started a list. Names, dates, emails, phone numbers. I planned a community meeting, not in the HOA clubhouse, but at the Legion Hall, where people couldn't be bullied into silence under the HOA's fluorescent lights. I'd invite reporters. I'd let neighbors see the documents we'd found. I'd let them ask questions. The truth, I figured, was the most violent thing you could throw at their power. I fell asleep that night with the map spread out like a promise. This is my land, this is my story, and I am not finished.
The night that changed everything started with a knock. Not the usual polite tap of a neighbor. It was firm, deliberate, and wrong. I had just finished dinner when the power flickered out. Outside, the sound of engines idled in the dark. My heart raced. I peeked through the blinds and saw 2 trucks parked by the tree line. 3 men stood there, flashlights cutting through the fog. And behind them, the HOA president, Derek, wearing his usual smirk. "Mr. Lawson, we need to talk," he called out. "It's about your violation cases." I didn't answer. I knew their version of talk always ended with some new demand or threat. Suddenly, they started pounding on the door. "You can either cooperate now or we'll make this harder," one of them shouted. That's when fear mixed with anger. These people had fined me, harassed me, even set fake legal notices. But this was different. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. I was cut off. I could hear the rain beginning to fall, wind whistling through the trees. They must have known I'd be alone. My wife was visiting her sister in Oregon that week. Derek's voice turned colder. "You're going to come with us, Tom. We just need your signature. After tonight, this'll all be over." They forced the door open. My flashlight beam hit their faces, calm, confident, like they had done this before. They took my arms, zip-tied my wrists, and dragged me out into the storm. The woods swallowed us whole. The air was wet and thick, and the sound of rain masked everything. I stumbled, mud soaking through my jeans. They kept saying, "You'll thank us for this later." After what felt like forever, we reached an open clearing. There, on a folding table, was a stack of documents wrapped in plastic. A quitclaim deed transferring my cabin and land to Lakeview Homeowners Association, Inc. Derek leaned close, water dripping from his hair. "All you have to do is sign, Tom. You've been nothing but trouble for us. This property will do more good in our hands." I stared at him, drenched, furious, and shaken. "You think this is legal?" "Legal?" he scoffed. "Nobody'll believe you anyway. You the guy who threatened HOA members, remember? That's what everyone thinks." They had painted me as the villain. Months of lies, complaints, and fake legal cards had done their work. When I refused to sign, one of the men grabbed me by the collar. His breath smelled like whiskey. "You're gonna sign, old man, or you'll wish you did." But something in me snapped. I wasn't going to die in those woods. I looked around and spotted what I needed, an old broken tree branch thick as a baseball bat. I waited until the man closest turned his head, then swung with everything I had. He went down hard. I ran. Branches ripped at my face, mud flew, and adrenaline pushed me faster than I ever ran. I could hear shouting behind me, flashlight beams darting through the trees. I didn't stop until I reached the creek. I dove in, the freezing water shocking my body. I let the current take me downstream, hidden beneath the darkness. When I finally crawled out, miles away, I was shaken, cold, furious, and alive. But I wasn't done. They thought they could take everything from me. They had no idea what I had planned next. By dawn, I was back at the cabin. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt soaked in dread. Every window pane reflected my exhaustion. My wrists burned from the zip ties, my body ached, but my mind, it was clear. The fear was gone. What replaced it was rage. Cold, methodical rage. I started a pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and began writing everything down. Every threat, every fake violation notice, every recording I had secretly made during the past few months. You see, Derek and his little HOA enforcers thought they were dealing with some lonely homeowner too scared to fight back. But they forgot I used to be an insurance investigator. And if there's one thing I know, it's how to document everything. I still had the voice recordings from that night, their threats, their names. Derek demanded my signature in the woods. It wasn't perfect evidence yet, but it was enough to start a fire. That morning I drove into town. My truck barely made it down the muddy road, but I didn't care. I went straight to Sheriff Daniels, the same man who'd brushed off my complaints for months. He looked up when I walked in, disheveled, wet, and shaking with fury. "Tom, what the hell happened to you?" "They dragged me into the woods. The HOA, Derek. They tried to force me to sign over my land." He frowned, leaned back. "You got any proof of that?" I played him the recording. Derek's voice echoed through the tiny office, smug, confident, undeniable. The sheriff went pale. He knew Derek. Everyone did. The guy was connected. Money, lawyers, the works. But this crossed the line. "All right," he muttered, "we're going to do this by the book." Within hours, deputies were at my cabin. They combed the woods, found the folding table, the documents, everything Derek left behind when he fled. My camera, the one I'd installed under the porch light, had even cut them dragging me out. The sheriff called the DA called the state police, and by the next morning, the local news was already sniffing around. But I wasn't done yet. I went to the next HOA meeting, uninvited. The room went silent when I walked in. Derek wasn't there, but his wife and 2 board members were. I could feel their eyes on me like they were seeing a ghost. I stood at the front of the room, pulled out my phone, and hit play. Derek's voice filled the space. "You're gonna sign, old man, or you'll wish you did." Gasps, whispers, phones came out. Someone started recording. I looked at them and said, "This is the kind of leadership you've been following. A man who kidnaps his neighbors for property." The HOA vice president tried to speak, but I cut her off. "Don't bother. The sheriff already has the evidence. Enjoy explaining this to your lawyers." I walked out to the sound of murmuring, chairs scraping, panic blooming like wildfire. That night, I sat on my porch again. The air was calm. The lake still was. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. But I knew this wasn't over. Derek wasn't the type to go quietly, and something told me he'd try one last desperate move. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting explosion, the neighborhood looked different. Quiet, watchful. People didn't wave anymore when I drove by. They stared, half of them in shame, the rest in fear. Word spread fast in a small lakeside community. The sheriff's office raided Derek's property 3 days later. They found fake HOA documents, blank transfer deeds, and even cash withdrawals tied to private land acquisitions.
Turns out, he and two board members had been strong-arming older residents into selling cheap, then flipping their homes to developers. My land? That was supposed to be their jackpot. But even with the arrests, I didn't relax. I knew Derek wouldn't sit in the cell quietly. The night before his court hearing, someone tried to slash my truck tires. Another night, a drone hovered outside my window for nearly an hour before vanishing into the trees. I didn't sleep. I kept my shotgun close, just in case. Then, one foggy morning, I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. 3 men, big, silent, moving with intent. I turned off the light, heart pounding. Through the curtain, I caught a glimpse. Black jackets, gloves, something glinting in one of their hands. I didn't wait to see more. I stepped out the back door with my shotgun cocked. The fog was thick enough to hide in. The sound of their boots crunched closer. "Tom? Come on, man. Derek just wants to talk." I nearly laughed. That same line they used before dragging me into the woods. "Tell Derek he should have stayed behind his lawyer this time," I shouted back. They froze. The silence stretched. Then, a single movement. One of them reached for his waistband. I fired into the air. The blast shattered the stillness, echoing across the lake. Birds exploded out of the trees. The men bolted like cowards. I didn't chase them this time. I didn't need to. By sunrise, the sheriff's cruisers lined the road again. Derek's men were gone, but their fingerprints weren't. And when the deputies reviewed my security footage, they caught a clear shot of one of them, a known associate of Derek's. That was the final nail. The court hit Derek with aggravated assault, kidnapping, and conspiracy. His HOA was dissolved, his assets frozen, his reputation ruined. And me? I rebuilt my porch, fixed my fence, installed new cameras, but mostly for peace of mind. The same neighbors who once sided with Derek started showing up with pies and apologies. "We didn't know," they said. "We were scared too." I nodded. Forgiveness didn't come easy, but freedom did. My cabin stood strong, my land untouched. The woods that once terrified me now felt like home again. One afternoon, I walked down to the edge of the lake, the same lake Derek tried to steal. The reflection of the sunset danced on the water. I could still see the faint marks on the ground where they'd forced me to sign. I smiled. Sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness. Derek thought he could control me because I lived alone, because I kept quiet, because I didn't fight back right away. But silence isn't surrender, it's calculation. The HOA's power came from fear and intimidation, but once that fear breaks, they have nothing. I learned that protecting your home isn't just about property lines. It's about standing up for what's yours, no matter who tries to take it. That cabin isn't just wood and nails. It's proof that no one, not even an HOA with lawyers and money, gets to bully an honest man off his land.